I chose white not from any belief in love, but so he'd understand the price of touching me. What drives a woman to marry someone just to cause them pain? Why flash a smile for the camera when your heart schemes for vengeance? And what occurs when your plan to shatter him ends up breaking you instead? You'll be captivated by every detail. If tales like this resonate with you, hit like and subscribe. The most memorable stories always start with hidden truths. The ceremony was perfect for everyone except me. The Whitlock mansion rose like a frozen temple on the hillside, partially shrouded in drifting snow. Smoke curled from its chimneys into the darkening sky. Golden light flickered from every window against the gray twilight. From outside it appeared magical. That was intentional. Within, an eerie stillness prevailed. The wedding took place in the grand hall. Though no melodies played, only the whisper of fabric and the gentle chime of vintage silver. Romain stood beside me, wordless, grave. His three-piece suit matched the color of storm clouds. His gaze never found mine, not during the minister's words, not when I spoke my vows, not even as he placed the ring on my finger with the precision of someone winding a timepiece. He signed the certificate with a silver pen. I followed suit. No kiss, no speeches, no pretense. We became spouses on paper, in public, for power. The clapping was restrained, brief, as if the guests preferred not to acknowledge their presence. Romain offered nothing but a fleeting glance. Before turning away, I required nothing more. Affection wasn't why I came. I never smiled. Not once. I walked alongside him, not trailing behind, not clutching his arm, simply beside him like two figures carved from the same block of marble. My footsteps echoed his rhythm, but our thoughts diverged completely. He wed me because he required a wife. I wed him because I needed entry to this house, to his secrets, to the history he'd buried beneath stone and legal documents. He believed he'd acquired a quiet, intelligent woman without complications. He failed to recognize the daughter of the man he'd ruined. Dinner proved even worse. We occupied opposite ends of a table designed for 20. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above us. The fireplace crackled at our backs. A servant set down plates neither of us touched. "You're unusually quiet," Romain eventually said, slicing his steak with surgical precision. "I assumed that was your preference." He raised his eyes. They were gray like wet slate. "You assumed correctly?" I held his stare longer than appropriate. Neither of us looked away. First out after the meal, Roman vanished into his office. The staff escorted me to the bridal suite. It was stunning in a cold manner, deep velvet drapes, ivory furnishings, firewood stacked in a hearth that hadn't seen flames in years. At the center stood an enormous cedar bed, dark and heavy, carved with vines and thorns, like something pulled from an unwilling forest. The room carried the scent of time, of things buried, but not quite dead. I remained in my gown. I left my hair arranged. I moved slowly toward the bed, clutching the bouquet I never tossed. Then I reached into my sleeves lining and withdrew the photograph dot. It was worn and faded. My father in his courthouse attire. The last time he appeared proud. Before the lawsuit, before the scandal, before Roman Whitlock's empire silenced his reputation. Nobody here knew my true identity. Elise Danvers, daughter of the man who once championed truth in a courtroom and lost everything for it. Roman had witnessed my father's downfall from the opposing side. He'd signed the agreements. He'd crushed the reputation. He hadn't hesitated. He wouldn't. Did he remember the little girl in the hearing room's back row? He didn't know she'd grown up, studied law, changed her name, gotten hired as a junior legal advisor in his company, smiled at appropriate moments, asked the right questions, appeared in the right places. He didn't know that girl had become his wife. I concealed the photo behind the painting above the mantel. One small act of defiance, a seed planted, Then I perched on the bed's edge, still dressed as a bride, and let the silence envelope me. No footsteps in the corridor, no approach. Roman wouldn't come here tonight. That had always been part of our arrangement. 1 year of marriage, no intimacy, no interference. He had obtained his image. I'd gained my access. We were both deceiving ourselves. Outside, the snow continued falling, thick now. The windows shimmered with it. I let the veil slip from my hair to the floor. My shoulders ached. The corset bit into my ribs. Still, I remained motionless. I gazed at the carved headboard, traced the worn pattern with my fingertips. Cedar. It held a fragrance that outlasted memory. It reminded me of courtroom benches, of my father's coat, of the coffin that contained his silence when truth never emerged. I didn't weep. I hadn't wept since the verdict. Not when my mother departed. Not when the final client abandoned my father's firm. Not when he closed his practice and collapsed himself. I arrived here with no tears remaining. Only determination. I lay down slowly on the bed, shoes still on. The gown rustled like paper. The chandelier above me glimmered in golden silence. And in that silence, I whispered, "Dad, I made it." The room offered no response. The air remained still. But deep within me, something began to fracture, not with sorrow, not yet, but with the weight of everything I'd carried too long. A house of justice had burned once. Tonight I was within the flames. I was 11 when my father lost his reputation. We stood outside the courthouse, wind tugging at his overcoat, headlines already spreading ink across the city. Danvers charged with malpractice. Whitlock legal destroys competitor. I remember gripping his hand so tightly my nails left crescents in his palm. He didn't wince. He never did. Not when accusations flew. Not when clients turned away. Not when. My mother whispered, "I warned you not to challenge them," and slammed the bedroom door for the final time. He remained straight-backed, sober, silent. "Truth doesn't win in courtrooms, Elise," he told me once, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders while I sat curled in his office chair. "It's timing, money, optics, and Whitlock possesses all three." Roman Whitlock wasn't present that day. He didn't need to be. His signature appeared on every document that buried my father, his attorneys, his influence, his quiet reach across state lines. They strangled every avenue my father could have used to clear his name. He never had a chance. The collapse was clean, surgical. We lost the firm, the house. My dog went to a shelter. My mother went to New Hampshire. But my father stayed until his heart gave out. I discovered him in the kitchen 2 years later. Coffee mug in the sink, legal pads still scattered on the table. He died sitting upright. The only sound I made that day was the front door closing behind the paramedics. That's why I stopped crying forever. I changed my name by senior year, kept my head down, law school and scholarship, clerkship in a firm 3 floors below Whitlock and Company. I thought I'd feel something when I finally entered the same elevator as him, but he didn't notice me. Not that day, not the next. Not even when I began speaking in meetings, nodding at his observations, echoing his phrases. He saw me as competent, efficient, useful, and that was all I needed. The night he proposed was peculiar. It wasn't romantic. There was no ring, just him standing by the fireplace in his penthouse, holding a glass of scotch and saying, "I require a wife." I blinked. For what purpose? A merger, image management. Certain investors have more confidence. Instability, a pause. It won't be permanent. I could have laughed. I nearly did. But instead I said, "You want a contract?" He met my gaze. "I want a partner who understands discretion." I said yes. Not because I desired him, but because he just handed me the keys to his house, to his world, to the empire he thought nobody could ever touch. Back in the present, I sat alone in the bridal suite, still awake as the grandfather. Clock chimed midnight. The fire had long since died. I traced my finger along the cedar bed's carved edge, thinking of the people Ramon had likely stepped over to reach this point, thinking of my father's eyes, too weary to be angry at the end. Didn't want revenge, but I did. I didn't believe in ghosts. But that night, I felt something press against my skin like breath. The next morning, I woke before dawn and walked through the Whitlock estate as if I already belonged. The house was an archive of control, every hallway pristine, every bookcase arranged by color rather than author, every rug symmetrical to the floor tiles beneath. This was a world built not for warmth but for legacy, and I'd just become its centerpiece. In the east corridor, I passed a portrait gallery, Whitlocks through the ages, stern, pale, unmoved. The last was a painting of Ramon and his late wife. Alana, she was beautiful, delicate-looking, with dark curls and quiet eyes. I stared longer than I should have. Something about her expression disturbed me. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't pride. It was something I recognized in my self-resolve. A maid appeared around the corner, startled to see me. "I'm Mrs. Whitlock," I said gently, "just exploring." She nodded, curtsied slightly, and disappeared. In the conservatory, I found Ramon. Was reading the newspaper, wearing a dark wool sweater with rolled sleeves, his hair damp from a shower. When he saw me, he didn't smile, but something in his eyes shifted. "You're up early." I couldn't sleep. He folded the paper in half, precise as always. "You'll adjust to this house." "I don't intend to." His brow arched. "That's honest." "I assume." "You prefer honesty. I prefer clarity. A beet? Coffee?" I nodded. He poured me a cup without asking how I took it. Black, bitter like his gaze. We sat in silence, not awkward, not comfortable, just silence. Then I said, "Do you always eat breakfast alone?" "I do everything alone." I sipped. "That sounds lonely." "It's intentional." I held his stare. "So was this marriage." "Yes," he said simply. I turned back to the window. Outside, the snow was beginning to melt more quickly, just enough to soften the edges of the frozen world. In that moment, I realized something strange. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't warm, but he wasn't unreachable either. Ramon Whitlock wasn't the villain I'd rehearsed in my head for a decade. He was a man who'd forgotten how to be human. And worse, nobody in his life seemed to mind. That didn't change anything. I wasn't here to rescue him. I was here to dismantle him. One perfect cup of coffee at a time. Some silences are passive. This one wasn't. That evening, I selected the blue silk dress, the one with sleeves just off the shoulder. Modest, but suggestive enough to make a man wonder. I wasn't trying to seduce Romo, not really, but I wanted to see if he would look not as a husband, but as a man. When I entered the dining room, his eyes lifted for just a second, but it was enough. He wore a crisp white shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbow, no tie, his collar open just enough to reveal the pulse at his throat. The room smelled of aged wine and something darker, cedar and salt and cold air seeping through a cracked window. "You look different tonight," he said. "It's a dress," I replied, sliding into my seat. "Not the dress." I didn't respond. Let the silence speak for me. Dinner was quiet again, roasted lamb, root vegetables, a sauce I couldn't identify. I noticed he chewed slowly, methodically, as if taste wasn't the point, just control. Halfway through, I reached for my water glass and brushed his hand, just a fingertip against his knuckle. He didn't flinch, but he did pause. I saw it, that half-second pause where the air thickened. After the plates were cleared, he stood. "Walk with me." His voice was too even. Yes. We walked the outer corridor, its arched windows showing the moonlit garden below. My heels tapped softly on the tile. Ramen's steps made no sound. He moved like he belonged to the house, as if the floors bent to him. "Why law?" he asked suddenly. I was good at it. "That's not a reason, that's a skill." I smiled faintly. "Maybe." I liked watching people lie under oath. He stopped, turned to face me. "You enjoy manipulation, don't you?" A flicker in his eyes, maybe amusement, maybe warning. "I enjoy accuracy," he said, dot outside the glass. Snow fell again, gentle, slow. He stood close enough that I could smell the warmth of his skin under the starch of his shirt. Clean, sharp. He hadn't shaved that morning, and I could see the faint shadow on his jaw. "If you think I married you for affection," he said quietly, "you're mistaken. I never assumed that." "Then what do you assume?" I met his gaze, steady. "That you needed someone who wouldn't ask questions. And will you?" "Only the right ones." He stared at me for a long time, and I could feel the tension between us tighten, not sexual, not romantic, but something else. Like a line drawn on the floor, daring one of us to cross it. He didn't. Neither did I. The next day, I passed the old music room and heard it piano, a few broken notes, then silence. Then another attempt. I peered through the half-closed door. Raming sat at the bench, his back to me, pressing keys with slow precision. He wasn't playing for beauty. He was remembering. I watched him for a full minute before I realized what I felt pity. And I hated that evening. I tested him again. I walked into his study without knocking, a bourbon glass in my hand. I didn't sit. I stood by the window, letting the low lamplight catch the curve of my neck. He didn't look up from his papers. "Did you need something?" "I was bored." He flipped a page. "You'll adjust to that." "I don't intend to." This time his eyes lifted. "Do you always repeat yourself?" "Only when I want to be heard." A pause. "You were," he said quietly. I set the glass down on his desk, deliberately close. The scent of lemon oil on the oak wood mingled with the bourbon. He reached for the glass. Our fingers didn't touch, but the heat between them almost did. "Careful," I said. "It's strong." "So are you." Then he drank. And for the first time since our wedding, I felt the power shift slightly. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the cedar bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind calculating timelines, files I still needed to access, conversations to steer. But something kept intruding his eyes, not their color, but their stillness. The kind of stillness that wasn't emptiness, but restrained grief. The next morning, I lingered longer at breakfast. Roman read the paper. I watched him over my coffee. "You don't miss her, do you?" I asked suddenly. He didn't ask who I meant. "No." "Then why keep her portrait?" He turned the page. "Because I owe her nothing but memory." "You loved her?" He didn't look at me. "That's not your business, but I'm your wife." A slow glance up. "Are you?" And there it was, my first real wound. Later, that afternoon, I returned to Alana Whitlock's portrait. I stood before it, reading every brushstroke like a diary. She looked brave and sad, like she knew this house would never truly be hers. I went back to my room, unzipped my dress, and stood before the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't crying, she never did. But something in her posture, shoulders drawn, lips pressed, told me the war she'd started might not go as planned out. They say the dead can't speak. But in this house, she whispered from every corner, "Alana Whitlock." Her name was never spoken aloud, not by Ramon, not by the staff, but her presence lingered on the piano bench. In the dustless faces, in the guest wing, nobody entered. I had memorized her face from the portrait, but it was her absence that haunted me. And today, I plan to press that ghost into the light dot it started with the drawer. I waited until Roman left on business. He always departed just before dawn, as if the sun couldn't rise while he remained home. I used the excuse of redecorating the library, an idea he approved with a dismissive wave, and had the key brought to me inside the antique desk in the far corner. Behind the third drawer was a locked compartment. I knew about it because I watched the housekeeper open it once to check for moths. I hadn't forgotten it clicked open with a soft metallic sigh. Inside lay a red leather journal worn at the edges. No name on the cover. I turned to the first page. The handwriting was delicate, slanted a woman's voice still breathing through ink. He doesn't smile in his sleep. Not even then. Alana's journal. I didn't read all of it, not from guilt. There was none. But because every line I read made my pulse shift in ways I didn't want to admit. She hadn't been naive or blind. She had loved him fully, yes, but also watched him with suspicion. She wrote of his long silences, his absences, the strange ache of sharing a life with someone who built entire empires and couldn't say, "I miss you." I thought marriage would melt him. It didn't. It froze me. I stopped reading after that. 4. The first time, I wondered if I was truly different from her or just more calculated. That evening, I wore black not for mourning, but for contrast. The silk clung to my hips and caught the hallway light like water. I walked into the lounge, where Roming was nursing a drink, and stood before the fireplace. He looked up. Didn't blink. New dress? New mood, I replied. He sipped his scotch. And what brings this mood? Your late wife? The glass paused at his lips. I stepped closer. I found her journal. His gaze didn't soften, didn't harden, it simply locked. You went through my things? No, I said. I went through hers. He set the glass down gently, as if afraid anything louder might break something he didn't want me to see. You think she helped you understand me? No, I said softly. I think she already did. A long silence. He walked past me, stopped at the mantel, touched the edge of a framed photo I hadn't noticed before. You think I destroyed her? His voice was quiet, barely above breath. I think you made her disappear. He turned then slowly, and for the first time since I married him, I saw it not power, not control, but grief. I loved her, he said, simple as a fact. She didn't believe that, I said. His jaw tightened. She wanted a version of me that never existed. And what do you want? I asked. He studied me. I felt my skin burn under that look, not from desire, but from being seen. Really seen. I want silence, he said. Then why did you marry me? He didn't answer, just walked toward me and stopped so close I could feel the heat from his chest. I don't remember why anymore. The next words I spoke weren't planned. I'm not her. No, he said. You're much more dangerous. My breath caught. Why? Because she wanted love. You want power. And suddenly, it wasn't a game anymore. I felt how close we stood, the magnet between two people who should have stayed on opposite sides. I didn't step back. He didn't move forward. But the air between us pressed and pulsed like a held breath. If I kissed you right now, he said low, would you bite me? Only if you pulled away, but he didn't kiss me. He turned and left the room, and for the first time since I married him, I was the one off balance that later that night I went back to. A cedar bed. The house was silent, not even the snow touched the windows. I lay awake trying to remind myself who I was, what I'd come here for. My father's name, the reputation lost, the files I still hadn't found, but her voice from the journal echoed. I thought marriage would melt him. It didn't. It froze me, and I wondered, was I freezing too, or was I melting without knowing? For days after the journal, we didn't speak of it again, but everything had changed. Our silences were louder, our glances sharper. Every movement we made around each other carried weight. He was careful not to touch me. I was careful not to want him to, but the air between us had cracked. And no matter how still we tried to be, something kept slipping through. That Thursday, he found me in the West Wing library. I was tracing the spine of an old legal volume when I sensed him behind me. He didn't announce himself. He never did. Rumming Whitlock didn't enter rooms. He arrived. "Why did you become a lawyer?" His voice came low, unexpected. I turned. "Because I believed in justice." His mouth twitched, not a smile, not quite. "Still do?" "Not since the day they called my father a fraud." He studied me long enough that I felt something heat beneath my collar. "Your father was Harold Danvers." It wasn't a question. It wasn't supposed to be possible. I felt everything inside me freeze. "You knew?" "I had my suspicions," he said. "They were confirmed the day you asked about the Whitlock settlement from 2011. Only someone with skin in the past would care." "Then why?" I swallowed hard. "Why marry me?" He stepped closer, not threatening, just deliberate. "Because I thought I could control it." And now a pause. "Now I don't know what the hell I'm doing." I couldn't breathe. This was the confrontation I'd prepared for, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like exposure, like standing under a light I hadn't agreed to. He didn't accuse. He didn't yell. He looked disappointed, not in me, but in himself. "Your father wasn't innocent," he said quietly. "He wasn't guilty either. He was careless. Trusted the wrong people." I flinched. "And you exploited that." Raman's voice stayed level. "I didn't ruin him." I let the fire burn without pouring water. "You watched him fall." "Yes," he said, and I didn't reach. The silence between us now wasn't tense. It was heavy, too full. "I wanted to hurt you," I whispered. "I know." "Do you?" He nodded once. "But you didn't come here just to burn me. You came here looking for something else." I stared. "Like what?" "I don't know," he said. "But whatever it is, it's killing you." I walked past him to the window, needing space. The snow was turning to sleet, streaking against the glass in sharp diagonal lines. I thought if I could get inside your life, inside this house, I could find what he never could: proof, something to make it right again. "And did you?" he asked behind me. I didn't turn. No, the sleet kept falling. My reflection in the glass looked older than 25. "Everything I thought I needed to feel better," I said. "It didn't help. Being your wife didn't fix it." "Raman's voice came soft. "You're not here to be my wife." "I was," I said, "until you started looking at me like I wasn't invisible." I turned back. He hadn't moved, but something in him had dropped: the armor, the edges. The CEO had left the room. Only the man remained. "Why did you let me in?" I asked. "I thought I'd break you before you broke me." The honesty stung more than a slap. "Did it work?" Roman stepped forward. "No," he said. "You broke something else, something I forgot I had." We stood inches apart. My throat burned. My hands trembled. "I hate you," I whispered, "for what you did to him." "I know." "And I hate myself," I added, voice cracking, "for not hating you enough anymore." Roman exhaled like the truth had gutted him. His hand lifted, hesitant, deliberate, and brushed the side of my face. I didn't flinch. I didn't lean in. I just closed my eyes. His thumb caught one tear I didn't realize had fallen. Then he whispered, "Let me carry it now." And just like that, the line between us broke. Later that night, I stood barefoot in the hallway outside his room. I didn't knock. I didn't have to. He opened the door as if he'd been waiting. The bed was wide, cold, untouched. We didn't speak. He reached for me the way someone reaches for something they're not sure they deserve. I let him, not because I forgave him, not because I forgot, but because for once I wasn't pretending. We undressed slowly, not for performance, but for reverence. His hands didn't rush. Mine didn't guide. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't rough. It was real. Bodies colliding, not from lust, but ache. Grief made physical. Truth turned skin dull when it was over. I didn't cry. He didn't speak. We lay in silence. And for the first time since I was 11 years old, I felt warm. I didn't mean to fall asleep beside him. I told myself I'd leave once the room was dark, once his breathing had evened out, once I could feel like I'd won something. But when I opened my eyes, it was morning. Pale light slid through the curtains like a secret. Roman was still asleep, beside me, bare-chested, jaw slack, one arm flung across the empty part of the bed, as if he'd reached for something in his sleep and missed. I stared at him. I had spent 3 years building the perfect plan, and one night undid it. I slipped from the sheets quietly. The wood floor was cold beneath my feet. My dress, forgotten, wrinkled, discarded, lay across the cedar trunk at the foot of the bed. I picked it up with careful fingers as if it might break. I didn't look back until I was already at the door. Romain hadn't moved, but something in me had. Back in my room, I stood before the mirror for a long time. My skin was flushed in places. My mouth looked fuller, my eyes softer. I didn't look like someone who had won anything. I looked like someone who had surrendered. Downstairs, the estate was alive again. The staff had returned to their rhythm. Breakfast trays, polished banisters, fires rekindled in the library. Everything unchanged except me. I sat at the long dining table alone. No appetite, no plan. What had I come here for? To find proof? To get justice? To humiliate a man I blamed? For everything I'd lost. But last night, I hadn't taken anything from him. If anything, I gave something I didn't mean to my silence. My softness, my Roman, entered 10 minutes later. Dressed in charcoal gray, freshly shaven, composed, he paused when he saw me. Neither of us spoke right away. He sat across from me, the same place he always sat, a million miles from touching distance. About last night, he said finally. Don't. I cut in, his eyes darkened. You regret it? No, I said. That's the problem. He said nothing, just nodded once. We ate in silence, but it wasn't like before. It wasn't cold. It was cautious, like walking over thin ice after hearing the first crack. I watched his hands, how they moved. The way he buttered his toast with, unnecessary precision. The way his left index finger tapped once against the rim of his coffee mug. Every time he thought he was unraveling too, he just did it neater. After breakfast, I retreated to the greenhouse. I needed space, needed to breathe. Something that wasn't made of money or memory. The air smelled of wet earth and jasmine. I curled up on the old wrought iron bench and pulled the blanket over my knees. My father's voice drifted back to me. Distant. If you stare too long into your enemy, Elise, you'll start seeing yourself. Had I seen the parts of Roman I didn't want it to see because they mirrored mine. Lonely, grieving, closed off. We had built walls from different stones, but they stood just as high. The glass door creaked. Romain stepped inside. I didn't turn. He didn't sit. He stood behind me for a moment, then said, I wasn't going to apologize. Good. I meant what I said about not knowing what I'm doing. I wrapped the blanket tighter, and I meant what I said. I didn't plan to feel anything. His voice lowered. But you did. I turned then slowly. And now I don't know what I'm fighting for anymore. He knelt before me. It startled me more than if he'd raised his voice. I don't want to win this war, he said. And if I do, I'll let. You, he said. But not without showing you what losing me really means. I looked down into eyes I once vowed to ruin, and saw something that felt horribly like love. I don't trust you, I whispered. Then don't fall in love with me. He leaned in not for a kiss, but for my hand. He took it and held it like it mattered. Like I mattered. That night, I didn't return to the cedar bed. I went to the gallery room instead. I stood before Alana's portrait and whispered, I'm not trying to replace you. I'm just trying to survive him. But even as I said it, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't surviving Raming anymore. I was choosing him. And I didn't know if that terrified me or saved me. There are kinds of silence that feel like peace. This one burned. The air between Romang and me had shifted again, less brittle, more volatile. A match dropped into a dry forest. We didn't speak much, but when we did, it always lingered. Words hung between us like questions we weren't ready to ask, but the silence was starting to ache. And the way he looked at me now, it wasn't cautious. It was deliberate. It started that night in the study. Rain lashed the windows. Thunder rolled low across the hills. I stood near the fire, flipping through a volume of old Whitlock legal cases, pretending to read. Ramong sat behind his desk, unreadable, as always, except for the way he watched me over the rim of his glass. I turned a page too fast. He noticed. You're not here for the books, he said. I didn't deny it. He stood slowly, walked around the desk, and stopped 2 steps from me. The firelight danced along the planes of his face, cheekbone, jaw, mouth. I remembered too clearly. Tell me why. You came here, he said. You know why. I want to hear it. I looked up at him, chin raised. To destroy you. A beat. And now. My voice faltered. I don't know. His hand came up to my shoulder, not possessive, not forceful, just contact. Human. You could still do it, he said. Walk away. Leak what you know. Finish what you started. Would it hurt you? He nodded. Yes. Then maybe I already did. He stepped closer. Do you want me to hate you, Elise? I swallowed. I wanted it to be simple. Me versus you. But every time you do something I don't expect, it breaks the story I built. And last night, that wasn't part of the story at all. He cupped my cheek, then my breath hitched. I should have pulled away. Instead, I leaned in, and the kiss wasn't tender this time. It was hungry, desperate, made of everything we hadn't said. Hadn't touched, hadn't dared. My back hit the wall behind me, books tumbling from a shelf. His hands were in my hair, mine under his shirt, skin against skin, heat against history. We didn't make it to the bedroom. The couch took us both. Clothes half on, breath ragged, the storm outside pounding like it envied us. When it was over, we stayed tangled. His hand traced circles on my thigh. My fingers rested against his chest. His heartbeat was steady now, but not calm. And I asked the question I shouldn't have. Would you have married me if you knew the truth from the start? His reply came after a long pause. Yes, he said, but I wouldn't have let myself feel this much. The next morning, everything felt quieter. Roman was gone before I W.